The air in the dusty town square was thick with the smell of sweat, hay, and despair. The auctioneer's voice cut through the afternoon heat, a sharp, grating sound that promised no mercy. "Come now, good people of Elmsworth, do not be shy. Look at what is on offer." On the rough wooden platform, a young woman stood with her head bowed. Her wrists were bound with coarse rope, not tight enough to cut, but tight enough to remind her she was merchandise. Her name was Alara. "A healthy young woman, strong, capable. She can read, she can write, an asset to any household, I assure you." The auctioneer, a man with a greasy smile and dead eyes, paced before her. He gestured to Alara as if presenting a prize mare. "And we start the bidding at just 1 copper coin, 1 single copper. Surely someone here needs a hard worker for such a pittance." Silence. It wasn't just quiet, it was a heavy, suffocating void. Alara kept her eyes fixed on a splintered knot in the wood between her feet. She didn't need to look up to see the faces. She knew them. The familiar mask of fear, the twist of disgust, the subtle shuffling of feet as the crowd drew back, creating an invisible wall between them and the platform. They weren't looking at a woman. They were looking at a curse made flesh. The whispers started, low and venomous, slithering through the stillness. "The Deathbringer took the Miller family last winter. Bad luck follows her like a shadow. Not worth the risk, not for all the gold in the kingdom." Alara's heart, which had been a frantic drum against her ribs, began to slow into a cold, heavy thud. This was it. This was the end of the road that began when she was 6 years old and woke to a house consumed by flames. Her parents gone. Then the kind farmer and his wife who took her in, dead from a swift fever before she turned 11. The elderly scribe who taught her letters, found cold in his bed one morning. The blacksmith and his lively family, their wagon found shattered at the bottom of Ravensdrop Gorge. 4 households, 4 families, all gone within years of taking in the orphan girl. Coincidence, a rational mind might say, a staggering, cruel run of misfortune. But in a superstitious village, in a world where people believed in spirits and hexes, a pattern was a sentence. Alara wasn't unlucky, she was poisoned, a carrier of doom. Anyone who let her get close would pay the ultimate price. And now, her last guardian's greedy nephew, wanting to be rid of her and squeeze some profit from the nuisance, had sold her to this traveling auction block, and not a single soul in this crowded square was willing to pay a single copper to own her. The auctioneer's false cheer evaporated. His voice turned hard and impatient. "No bid? For a sturdy girl who can read? Very well, let us be clear. If there is no bid, the merchandise is disposed of. We do not carry useless cargo." A fresh wave of cold terror washed over Alara. Her knees trembled, but she locked them. She would not crumple. She would meet whatever came with her eyes open. She had promised herself that much. The auctioneer raised his hammer. "For the final time, starting at 1 copper. Going once?" A voice rang out from the very back of the crowd. It was a voice that did not shout, yet it carried over the square with absolute clarity. It was deep, calm, and held an authority that stilled the nervous whispers. 1 copper. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Heads turned, necks craned. Who would be so foolish? Alara's head snapped up, her breath catching in her throat. At the very edge of the gathering, leaning casually against a post as if observing a mildly interesting play, stood a man. He was tall, even from this distance she could see that, dressed in simple, dark traveling clothes, a worn cloak draped over his shoulders. His face was partly in shadow, but she could make out a strong jaw and the impression of focused attention. The auctioneer blinked, stupefied. You are bidding 1 copper for her?" "Yes," the stranger said, his tone utterly matter-of-fact. "That is the minimum bid, is it not?" It is, sir, but you must understand, this girl, there are stories, a curse, anyone who—" "I am aware of the stories. 1 copper. Do I have the winning bid, or shall we continue this charade?" He said it with such cool finality that the auctioneer's mouth opened and closed like a fish. He looked desperately at the crowd, hoping for a savior, for a rival bidder to drive the price up, for anyone to save him from selling cursed goods. The crowd only stared back, a mixture of horror and morbid fascination. Going, the auctioneer's hammer hovered. The strangers simply waited, an unmoving pillar of calm in the sea of fear. Sold! The hammer came down with a hollow thud that echoed in Ilara's soul. Sold to the gentleman at the back for 1 copper coin. The numbness returned, this time deeper. 1 copper. She was worth less than a loaf of stale bread, less than a bucket of water. The stranger had paid the absolute minimum the law allowed simply to move the auction along. He hadn't saved her, he had merely cleared an item from the block. Rough hands untied her wrists. She was given a slight, impersonal shove off the platform. She stumbled on the hard-packed earth, her legs weak. Before she could fall, a firm hand closed around her upper arm, steadying her. She looked up. The stranger was there. Up close, he was older than she first thought, perhaps in his late 30s, with lines of experience at the corners of his eyes. His hair was the color of dark walnut, but it was his eyes that held her, a striking, piercing shade of amber, like molten gold. They looked at her, through her, with an intensity that was neither cruel nor kind. It was assessing. He released her arm only to press a single dull copper coin into the auctioneer's waiting palm. The transaction was complete. Without a word, he turned and began walking towards the edge of the square, his stride long and purposeful. He did not look back to see if she followed. The unspoken command was clear. Come. Ilara hesitated for only a heartbeat. Behind her was the town, its hatred, and the disposal that awaited unsold goods. Ahead was a stranger with unsettling amber eyes who had bought a curse for pocket change. Every instinct screamed that this was a terrible idea, that men who bought women for coppers did not have good intentions. But the alternative was certain death. She took a shaky breath, gripped the tattered edges of her shawl, and followed the man who had just purchased her life for less than nothing.
One was a patient-looking, dapple-gray mare. The other was a massive, midnight black stallion that pricked its ears and regarded her with a keen, intelligent eye. The man went to the stallion, checking its tack with efficient motions. "Can you ride?" he asked, his voice still that same calm, low baritone. He didn't look at her. "A little," Ilara managed to say, her own voice a dry whisper. She had ridden plow horses on the farm a lifetime ago. He nodded to the gray mare. "Her name is Mist. She is gentle. Mount up." He moved to help her, his hands impersonal and swift as he gave her a boost into the saddle. His touch was careful, avoiding any unnecessary contact. He then swung up onto the black stallion with a fluid, powerful grace that spoke of a lifetime in the saddle. He gathered the reins. "Keep up," was all he said, before nudging his horse into a steady trot. Ilara urged Miss forward, the mare falling in obediently behind the stallion. They left Elmsworth behind, the clustered houses and judging eyes giving way to open fields and then the dense, ancient trees of the Blackwood forest. The sounds of the town faded, replaced by the rhythmic clop of hooves, the sigh of the wind in the pines, and the frantic beat of Ilara's own heart. Who was he? That was the question that screamed in her mind with every passing mile. A slaver? He lacked the brutish cruelty she associated with such men. A labor broker? Perhaps, but why buy the one person no one else would touch? A man seeking a wife? The thought was almost laughable. No man sought a cursed bride. The darker possibilities surfaced, icy tendrils in her gut. There were old tales, whispered around dying fires, of dark mages who sought those touched by tragedy for their rituals, of sacrifices meant to transfer a curse or to power foul magic, of men who believed lying with a cursed woman could grant them unnatural strength or longevity. Her throat tightened. 1 copper coin was certainly a cheap price for a sacrificial lamb. They rode in silence for what felt like an hour. The forest deepened, the path growing narrower. The stranger seemed to know the way perfectly, navigating without hesitation. Why? The word burst from Alara's lips before she could stop it, sharp and ragged in the quiet. The man glanced back at her, his amber eyes catching a sliver of dappled sunlight. Why what? Why did you bid? You heard them. You know what they say I am. She tried to keep her voice steady, but it trembled. 1 copper isn't a bid, it's an insult or a convenience. Which was it? He turned his gaze back to the path ahead. It was the quickest way to remove you from that platform, he said simply. A higher bid would have drawn attention, started a competition I did not desire. 1 copper was efficient. Efficient, Alara repeated, the word tasting bitter. So you didn't want me, you just wanted to clear the block. For you to remain was a death sentence. The auctioneer was not bluffing. I do not allow death sentences to be carried out in front of me when I can prevent them. It is a principle. A principle, Alara whispered. So you bought a cursed woman out of principle? I do not believe in curses, he stated, his voice flat and final. I believe in coincidence. I believe in tragedy. I believe in people searching for a villain when the world simply turns cruel. You are not cursed, Alara. You are unfortunate. There is a significant difference. Hearing her name in his mouth was a shock. How do you know my name? I inquired before the auction began. It is wise to know what one is purchasing. And you still purchased, knowing the stories, knowing the risk? The risk was yours, not mine, and it is now mitigated. He slowed his horse slightly so that they rode almost abreast on the wider part of the path. He looked at her directly, and the full force of his amber gaze was unnerving. You are not a carrier of doom. You are a survivor. The fact that you are still standing, after all you've endured, tells me more about your character than any village gossip ever could. That is worth more than copper, more than gold. Alaris stared at him, utterly disarmed. No one had ever spoken to her like that. No one had ever seen past the label of Deathbringer to the person beneath. His words were like a lifeline thrown into a stormy sea, but she was too afraid to grab it. What if it was a trick, a cruel game before the real purpose revealed itself? "Where are you taking me?" she asked, her voice small. "To a place of safety, where we can talk without fear of mobs or auctioneers, where you can rest. And after that, what do you want with me?" He was silent for a long moment, the only sound the crunch of leaves under hooves. Then, "I want to give you a choice," he said finally, "a real one, not the false choice between a noose and a chain. You are not property, despite what that transaction suggested. You are a person. When we reach safety, we will discuss what you want, where you wish to go, what life you wish to build. My role was to remove you from imminent danger. The rest is for you to decide." Tears, hot and sudden, pricked at the corners of Alara's eyes. She looked away quickly, blinking them back. Choice? No one had given her a choice since she was a child. Her life had been a series of reactions, to grief, to fear, to survival. The idea that she could want something, that she could decide her own path, was so foreign, it felt like a physical ache. She didn't believe him. She couldn't afford to, but a tiny, treacherous ember of hope flickered to life in the frozen darkness of her heart. He doesn't believe in curses, she thought. But what if the curse believes in him? What if it's just waiting? What if I bring my doom straight to his doorstep? The fear was an old, familiar companion. It whispered that this man, with his principles and his piercing eyes, was simply the next name on a tragic list. and the thought terrified her more than any slaver or dark mage ever could. The cabin appeared as the last light of dusk was filtering through the dense canopy. It was a sturdy structure of logs and stone, nestled in a small clearing beside a chattering stream. Smoke curled from its chimney, a promise of warmth in the deepening twilight. Someone was already here. As they approached, the door opened. A man stepped out, silhouetted against the firelight from within. He was older, his hair silver at the temples, his posture straight as a spear. He took one look at the stranger on the black stallion, and his reaction was immediate and instinctive. He dropped to one knee, his head bowed. "Your Majesty," the older man said, his voice filled with reverence and surprise. "We did not expect your return for another day." "Your Majesty." The two words struck Alara with the force of a physical blow. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. She swayed in the saddle, her fingers gripping the pommel until her knuckles turned white. She twisted to look at the man beside her, her eyes wide with disbelief. The stranger, no, the king, dismounted with that same effortless grace. He acknowledged the kneeling man with a slight nod. "Rise, Kaelin. Circumstances changed." Kaelin stood, his sharp eyes flicking to Alara with open curiosity but no judgment. "Sire?" "We have a guest. See that the lady's room is prepared. Hot water, food, whatever she requires." The king's tone was now unmistakably one of command, smooth and absolute. He turned back to Alara and offered his hand to help her down. Mechanically, she took it, sliding from Mist's back. Her legs almost gave way, but his grip was firm, steadying her. "You," she breathed, staring up at him. The simple traveler's clothes suddenly seemed like a pathetic disguise. The authority in his voice, the way Kaelin had knelt, it all made a horrifying, impossible sense. "You're a king?" "I am," he said, his amber eyes holding hers. "My name is Alistair, King Alistair of the Northern Reaches." He said it not with arrogance, but with a simple, weary factuality, as if admitting to a burdensome truth. "And you are my guest, Alara, not my property. Remember that." He had bought her for a copper coin. A king had bought her for a copper coin. The absurdity of it was so vast, it threatened to swallow her whole. Kings did not wander into squalid town squares. Kings did not haggle for cursed brides. Kings certainly did not pay the minimum possible price for anything in their entire lives. Kaelin, with impeccable efficiency, had a room ready. It was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a simple woolen blanket. An ewer of hot water steamed beside the basin. Alara washed in a daze, the grime of the road and the shame of the auction sloughing away. She changed into a soft, borrowed tunic and trousers that were too large but clean. The mundane acts of washing and dressing grounded her slightly in the surreal reality. When she emerged, she found Alistair and Kaelin in the main room of the cabin, speaking in low tones near the fireplace. A rough map was spread on the table between them. Kaelin was pointing to a spot. "The operation is larger than we thought, sire. 3 more towns along the border. The auctioneer you encountered is just a cog." "Then we remove the wheel," Alistair said, his voice cold. "Take a company at first light. Shut them down. Anyone who resists, detain. The kidnapped ones are to be returned to their families with compensation from the crown. It will be done." Alistair looked up as Alara entered. Kaelin immediately bowed his head to her. "My lady." Then he gathered the map and retreated to a corner of the cabin, giving them privacy. "Sit, please," Alistair said, gesturing to a chair by the fire. He poured a cup of tea from a pot on the hearth and handed it to her. The gesture was so normal, so domestic, it was more disorienting than the kneeling had been. Alara sat, cradling the warm cup. "You were investigating the auctions," she said, pieces clicking into place. "I was. Slavery is illegal in my kingdom. Trafficking women under the guise of bride auctions is a pestilence I intend to burn out." He sat across from her, his expression grave. "I was gathering evidence when I saw you on that platform." "And you felt princely compassion?" The words came out sharper than she intended, edged with all her confusion and fear. He didn't flinch. "I felt the bond," he said, his voice dropping, becoming more intense. "The mate bond, Alara. You are my fated mate." The teacup nearly slipped from her fingers. She fumbled, setting it down on the stone hearth with a clatter. She stared at him, waiting for the joke, for the reveal of some cruel punchline. That's not possible." "Why not?" "Because," she exclaimed, her composure shattering, "look at me. I'm a commoner, sold at auction. I'm cursed. I bring death. You are a king. Fated mates are for stories, for royal-like hands in chosen consorts, not for this." She jested wildly at herself, at her borrowed clothes, at the memory of the copper coin. "You are not cursed," he repeated, his voice a low, steady rumble that cut through her panic. "And the mate bond does not care about royalty or common blood. It cares about souls, and our souls are bound." "You're mistaken," she whispered, shaking her head. "It's the shock, the situation. You feel responsible, so you've convinced yourself—" "Show me your left wrist," he interrupted gently. Confused, Alara held out her arm. On the inside of her wrist was a small, pale birthmark. It had always been there, a faint, silvery crescent moon. Alistair leaned forward but did not touch her. He simply looked. "The mark of the moon's grace," he said softly, almost to himself. "It's just a birthmark." "It is a sign," he corrected. 1 in 10,000 are born with it under a specific lunar eclipse. It signifies a deep connection to lunar magic, a sensitivity." "Magic?" Alara recoiled, pulling her arm back. "I have no magic. I have a curse." "Untrained lunar magic is not a curse, but it can be volatile, defensive. It resides in those who are deeply empathetic, often those who have known great pain. Without training, it can lash out instinctively to protect its bearer from perceived threats." The theory unfolded in her mind, horrifying and plausible. The fire the night her father, in a drunken rage, had grabbed her too hard. The fever that took her foster father after he'd started looking at her in a way that made her skin crawl. The scribe who had grown cold and cruel, threatening to sell her to a mine. The blacksmith who drunkenly tried to corner her in his stable the day before the wagon accident. Each death had been preceded by a moment of pure, primal fear. Could it be? Could she have been the instrument, not of a random curse, but of her own unconscious magical self-defense? The weight of the possibility crushed her. "So I did kill them," she breathed, the horror hollowing her out. "No," Alistair said fiercely. "You did not. A part of you could not control reacted to save you. It's like a child flinching when struck. You are not to blame. But now we have the chance to understand it, to train it, to ensure it never controls you again." He reached out slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, and placed his hand over hers where it rested on the arm of the chair. His hand was warm, large, calloused from sword and rain. Tears spilled over, tracing hot paths down her cheeks. She didn't have the strength to wipe them away. "Why are you telling me this? Why are you being so kind?" "Because it is the truth," he said simply, "and because you deserve to know it. The girl on that platform, standing tall while the world called her a demon, deserves the truth, and she deserves a future." "And what future is that? With you? In a castle? As a queen? I can't even control the power that might have killed 4 families. What if I lose control in your court? What if I hurt you?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips, the first she had seen. It transformed his severe face, making him look younger, almost gentle. "I'm an alpha Lycan, Alara. Our kind are naturally resilient to most magics. My presence alone will help stabilize yours. And as for the rest, we will find you a teacher, a true moon mage. You will learn control. You will learn to wield your gift, not be wielded by it." He squeezed her hand gently before releasing it. "But all of that is for tomorrow. For tonight, you are safe. You are under my protection. No one will harm you here, and no one," he added, his gaze turning steely, "will dispose of you ever again." Alara looked into the fire, the flames dancing and weaving. A king, a mate, moon magic. It was a fantastical story, too incredible to be true, and yet the man sitting across from her believed it with every fiber of his being. He had bought her for a copper, saved her from death, and now was offering her a truth that was more terrifying and more hopeful than any curse. She didn't know what to believe, but for the first time in 14 years, the future was not a dark, inevitable road to the next tragedy. It was a vast, frightening, unknown landscape, and she was not walking into it alone.
The journey to the capital, Silverhold, took 3 days. Alistair had sent Kaelin ahead, and by the second morning, a royal carriage, elegant but discreet, met them at a crossroads. Inside, it was lined with deep blue velvet, the seats soft. Ilara sat across from Alistair, feeling like an imposter in a royal play. He spent the time telling her about his kingdom. The northern reaches were a land of mountains and deep forests, of hardy people and old traditions. Silverhold, the capital, was carved into the side of a great peak, a city of spiraling towers and cascading terraces that glittered in the sun. "My court is traditional, stubborn. They will have opinions," he said, watching the landscape roll by. "About you, about my sudden absence, about my return with a companion." "A common, cursed companion bought for a copper," Ilara finished flatly. He didn't deny it. "Yes, they will gossip. Some will be hostile, seeing an opportunity to challenge me or gain favor. Others will be merely curious. But my word is law, Ilara. You are my guest, and by my declaration, under my personal protection, anyone who disrespects you disrespects their king. That is a line none of them will be eager to cross." "It sounds like a battlefield," she murmured, looking out at the passing pines. "It can be, but it is my battlefield, and I have fought on it for a long time. You will not be fighting alone." He leaned forward slightly. "I need you to understand the mate bond and the way of my people. For Lycans, it is not just romance or destiny. It is a sacred, fundamental truth. Finding one's mate is the single most important event in an alpha's life. It supersedes politics, alliances, even war. To them, your arrival is not a scandal. It is a culmination, a sign of stability and divine favor for the kingdom. They will respect the bond, even if they do not yet respect you." Ilara absorbed this. She was a symbol then, and living emblem of his reign's legitimacy. The pressure of it was immense. "And if I can't live up to being a symbol, if my magic causes a scene, then we handle it," he said, his voice unwavering. "Together. But I have seen your strength, Ilara. I watched you face a crowd that wanted you dead. You have a core of steel. You will need it, but you have it." Silverhold took her breath away. It was not just a city. It was a mountain transformed into a masterpiece of stone and light. Waterfalls cascaded between levels, catching the sun in rainbows. Banners of deep blue and silver snapped in the crisp mountain wind. As their carriage climbed the switchback roads, people stopped to bow, their faces alight with curiosity. "The news has spread," Alistair said quietly, drawing the curtain slightly. "They know their king has returned with his mate." The castle was an extension of the mountain itself, towering walls, arched bridges connecting slender spires, gardens that seemed to hang in the air. Servants in livery lined the grand entrance hall as Alistair led her inside. Their eyes were wide, taking in her simple clothes, her wary expression. He took her not to the throne room or some grand receiving chamber, but to a set of rooms in a quieter wing. The Queen's chambers. The name alone made her dizzy. The rooms were serene, airy and light, with tall windows overlooking a dizzying drop to the valley below. The furniture was elegant but comfortable, in shades of cream, blue, and silver. A fire crackled in a marble fireplace. Fresh flowers sat on a table. "This is too much," Ilara breathed, hovering just inside the doorway. It is yours for as long as you wish it to be. The staff here are loyal. This is Sarah. She indicated a young woman with kind brown eyes who curtsied deeply. She will attend you. Ask for anything you need. Sarah smiled warmly. Welcome, my lady. A bath has been drawn, and we have some clothes for you, though the tailors will come tomorrow for proper fittings. Alistair lingered at the door. Rest. Explore. The castle is your home now. I have council matters to address, but I will return for dinner. We will dine privately. He paused, his gaze softening. You are safe here, Ilara. Remember that. When he left, the silence felt vast. Sarah helped her bathe in a sunken tub scented with lavender, washing away the last of the journey. The clothes provided were a simple but exquisite gown of soft gray wool. As Sarah brushed her long, dark hair, Ilara stared at her reflection in the polished mirror. The woman looking back was clean, well-dressed, cared for, but the eyes were still the same, haunted, uncertain. The eyes of the cursed girl from Elmsworth. Could a new dress and a royal chamber change that? Dinner was in a small, intimate salon adjoining her chambers. Alistair had changed into simpler, though still fine, clothes, a dark tunic, trousers, and boots. He looked less like a distant king and more like the traveler she had first met, though the air of command was now unmistakable. They ate in relative silence at first, the only sound the clink of cutlery. The food was delicious, flavors she couldn't name, but her stomach was in knots. Kaylin's report came in, Alistair said, finally, setting down his goblet. The auction ring has been dismantled. The man who sold you was in chains, awaiting trial. The other women have been returned to their families. Ilara put down her fork. Just like that? Because you ordered it? Because the law ordered it. I am merely its instrument. He studied her. Does that trouble you? It seems easy for you. Power is a tool. It is only as good or evil as the hand that wields it. I try to wield mine justly. He leaned back. Tomorrow, I must introduce you to the council, the inner circle. It will be formal, brief. I want you to be prepared. For what? For Lord Valerius to question your background, for Lady Selene to scrutinize your manners, for General Torvin to assess your strength. He listed them off as if discussing the weather. They are my advisors, but they are also powerful nobles with their own agendas. They will test you. And what should I do? Be yourself, he said simply, the woman who looked a hateful crowd in the eye without flinching. You need not pretend to be a courtier. You need only be Ilara. That is who the mate bond chose. That is who I brought here. That will be enough. It felt like an impossibly poor advice. Being herself was what got her sold for a copper, but the certainty in his voice was an anchor. The next morning, Sarah helped her into a more formal gown of deep blue, the color of the royal house. It fit perfectly, the tailor's overnight work a miracle of efficiency. Ilara felt like a doll playing dress-up. The council chamber was a vast circular room with a vaulted ceiling. A round table of dark wood dominated the center. 7 people sat around it, and they all stood as Alistair entered with Ilara at his side. He did not lead her to a chair. He stood at the head of the table, placing her slightly beside and behind him, a position of protected prominence. My lords, my lady, this is Ilara. She is under my personal protection and guest right within these walls. You will afford her every courtesy. An older man with a stern, hawk-like face and silver hair, Lord Valerius, was the first to speak. His eyes, sharp as flint, swept over Ilara. Your Majesty, we welcome your guest. The rumors from the southern towns are colorful. They speak of a curse. Alistair's expression didn't change, but a chill seemed to enter the room. They speak of gossip and fear, Valerius. Ilara is a victim of tragedy and superstition, nothing more. A graceful woman with pale blonde hair, Lady Selene, smiled, but it didn't reach her cool blue eyes. Of course, sire, we trust your judgment implicitly, but for the stability of the court, perhaps some clarification on the lady's origins and intentions would soothe nervous minds. Ilara's gazes felt like physical weight. The general, a broad-shouldered man with a scar across his cheek named Torvin, simply watched her, his expression unreadable. Alistair was about to speak, his tone turning dangerous, when Ilara found her voice. It was quiet, but it carried in the still room. "I understand your concerns," she said, forcing herself to meet Valerius's gaze, then Celine's. "I am from nowhere. I have no family. I was sold yesterday for a single copper because my village believed me cursed." She saw the shock flicker in Celine's eyes at the bluntness. His Majesty intervened out of kindness and principle. "I am here as his guest, not as a claimant to anything. My only intention is to not be a burden. I ask for no titles, no favors, only the safety he has offered." The silence that followed was profound. It wasn't a courtly speech. It held no flattery, no manipulation. It was raw, honest, and utterly disarming. General Torvin was the one to break it. A low rumble of a laugh escaped him. "Straight to the point. I like that." He gave a slight respectful nod in her direction. The meeting continued, shifting to matters of border tariffs and grain stores. Ilara stood silently, absorbing the dynamic, the undercurrents of loyalty and ambition. She was an outsider, a disruption, but Alistair's unwavering stance beside her was a wall against the storm. Later, on a balcony overlooking the city, the wind tugging at her hair, Ilara replayed the encounter. She had faced them, and she had not broken. "You did well," Alistair said, joining her. "Better than well. You were honest. In a court built on lies, that is a revolutionary act." "I just told the truth," she said softly. "The truth is the most powerful weapon we have, and you wielded it perfectly." He looked out at his kingdom, his profile sharp against the setting sun. "They will not trouble you again, not directly. But the court is a web, Ilara. The real tests will be subtler, whispers in corners, accidental slights. You must be ready." "I have faced mobs and auctions," she said, a spark of her old defiance returning. "I think I can handle whispers." He smiled, that rare, genuine smile. "I believe you can." But as night fell and Ilara lay in the enormous, too-soft bed in her luxurious prison, the doubts crept back. She had survived the first skirmish, but the war for her place in this impossible new life had only just begun. And somewhere, deep inside, the unfamiliar warmth of her magic stirred. A sleeping dragon, she was now terribly afraid to wake. The moon was a sharp silver sickle in the obsidian sky. Ilara couldn't sleep. The silence of the royal chambers was a different beast than the quiet of a forest or a hayloft. This silence was heavy, expectant, filled with the ghosts of queens past and the weight of futures not yet written. She paced, her bare feet silent on the thick rug. A whisper pulled her to the tall, arched window. Not a sound from outside, but a feeling, a cold, silken thread tugging at the very center of her being. She looked out over the moon-drenched city. In the valley below, nestled in the darkest part of the woods just beyond Silverhold's glittering borders, a faint, sickly green light pulsed once, then vanished. A shiver that had nothing to do with the cold racked her body. At the same time, a sharp, stabbing pain lanced through her left wrist. She gasped, clutching it. The crescent moon birthmark, usually pale and faint, was glowing with the same eerie silver light as the moon above. It burned with an icy fire. As quickly as it came, the pain and the glow subsided. Ilara stared at her wrist, her heart hammering against her ribs. A coincidence, a trick of the light in her frayed nerves. She repeated it to herself like a prayer. But deep in her bones, in the newly awakened place where that strange warmth now lived, she knew it was a lie. Something had answered the call of the moon, and something else, something dark and cold, had answered back. The next morning, the incident felt like a fever dream. Sarah arrived with breakfast and news. "Your Majesty has asked me to inform you, my lady, that your tutor will arrive after the noon bell, a Mistress Celestia." Anxiety twisted in Ilara's gut. A tutor, for magic she still desperately hoped was just a comforting story Alistair had invented. She spent the morning in the castle library, a cavernous hall of scent and knowledge. She wasn't searching for anything in particular, just the comfort of quiet in solitude. Her fingers trailed over leather-bound spines, the titles blurring. One book, older than the others, bound in gray leather that felt like cooled ashes, seemed to push itself into her hand. She pulled it from the shelf. It had no title. She opened it carefully. The pages were handwritten in a flowing, elegant script. "Those who bear the mark of the moon's grace are conduits, not creators. The magic is not theirs to own, but the moon's to lend. Its purpose is protection, preservation, purification. But beware the eclipse." The writing stopped, the next page torn cleanly out. Only a ragged edge remained. Ilara's blood ran cold. Purification. What did that mean? And what eclipse? She snapped the book shut, her skin crawling. She shoved it back on the shelf, but its words were already etched into her mind. Mistress Celestia was not what Ilara expected. She was not an ancient crone, but a woman of perhaps 60, with a serene, unlined face and hair the color of moonlit snow. Her eyes were pale, clear gray of a winter morning. She wore simple robes of dove gray. She stood in the private courtyard Alistair had designated for their use, as still as a statue. "Lady Ilara," Mistress Celestia said, her voice like wind chimes, "show me your wrist." Wordlessly, Ilara extended her arm. She did not touch her, but her pale eyes studied the crescent mark intently. A flicker of something passed over her serene face. Not fear, recognition, and deep, profound sadness. "The mark is active. It has been stirred." Celestia looked up, meeting Ilara's eyes. "Last night, you felt something." It wasn't a question. Ilara nodded, unable to lie to those knowing eyes. "A pain, and it glowed, and I saw a light in the woods to the west, a green light." Celestia's composure cracked for a single horrifying instant. A shadow of pure dread passed over her features before she mastered it. "I see," she said softly. "Then we have even less time than I feared. We begin now. Sit." The training was agony, not physical, but mental, spiritual. Celestia taught her not to reach for power, but to listen, to find the quiet pool of moonlight within her. "Your magic is a reflection," Celestia instructed, her voice a calming drawn. "It does not rage like fire or crash like waves. It whispers, it reveals, it shows things as they truly are. To wield it is not to command, but to understand, and to protect." For hours Ilara sat on the cold flagstones, trying to listen. She felt nothing but frustration and the gnawing memory of the green light. "It's not working," Ilara burst out, near tears of exhaustion. "There's nothing there but me, and I'm just angry and scared." "Anger is a shield, fear is a lock," Celestia said, unmoved. "You must set them down. The magic will not come if you hold them so tightly. Think of a moment of true peace, however small." Ilara closed her eyes, searching. The memories were all tainted. Happiness before a fire, comfort before a fever. Then she found one. A moment in the forest with Alistair, during their journey. A brief pause by a sun-dappled stream. He had been checking Mist's hoof, his movements sure and gentle. He looked up, caught her watching, and for a beat heart, there was no king, no cursed girl, just two people in a quiet wood. A moment of unexpected, uncomplicated peace. She clung to that feeling. And there, beneath the fear, She found it, a cool, silvery shimmer deep in her core, like moonlight on water. I feel something, she whispered. Good, Celestia said, a note of approval in her voice. Now, do not grasp it. Simply let your awareness rest upon it, like watching a fish in a pond. Do not stir the water. Days turned into a week. Ilara learned to find the cool pool of silver light within her at will. She learned to let its energy wash over her hands, manifesting as a faint, shimmering aura. She could make the air in front of her waver like a heat haze, a basic shield, Celestia said. It was exhausting, minute work. Alistair came each evening, a solid, reassuring presence. He asked about her progress, listened intently, but offered no pressure. His belief in her was a constant, warm ember in her chest. One afternoon, as Ilara practiced sustaining her fragile shield, a commotion erupted in the main courtyard below. Shouts, the clatter of hooves, a cry of alarm. Her concentration shattered. The shield flickered and died. She and Celestia rushed to the balcony. Below, royal guards were surrounding a rider on a lathered horse. The rider was one of Kaelin's men, his armor dented, his face streaked with blood and grime. Alistair was already there, his face like thunder. He could hear his voice, sharp as a blade, cutting through the din. Report. The outpost at Grimshaw Ford, sire, attacked just before dawn. Not bandits, sire. They were organized, and they had a symbol, a black sun eclipsed by a crescent moon. Every ounce of color drained from Celestia's face. She gripped the balcony, her knuckles white. Alistair's head snapped up. His gaze instinctively found Ilara on the balcony. His eyes held a question and a dawning, terrible understanding. The soldier continued, his voice cracking. They left nothing, sire. They just slaughtered. And they left a message carved into the stone. It said, "The man faltered. Out with it," Alistair commanded. It said, "The eclipse comes for the false moon." A deafening silence followed. All eyes in the courtyard, including